Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise Show. I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár, and this is the weekly show we do here every single Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I gather up some things in the world of movie news. We talk about some brand new movie news that dropped this week. We talk about some trailers. We do some brief movie reviews for different films that have opened this week. And we always have a main topic that gets a little bit deeper into an issue within the world of movie news. And once again, I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár. Usually we're joined by our co-host, Rob Jaginta. However, he cannot be here this week. It's been a pretty good week in terms of movies and everything. I just watched Marriage Story yesterday, which I will be talking about a little bit later in the show when we do Go or No Go, but I definitely have some things to say about that. So what are we going to talk about on the show today? We've got some news about a new Planet of the Apes movie coming. We've got trailers for Black Widow, for James Bond, for Mulan. We have the Marriage Story review, and we're going to talk about what were the top 5 strongest movie franchises of this past decade. So we're going to talk about all that and more on this show today. And we're going to kick things off with this. Did you hear? A new Planet of the Apes movie is coming from director Wes Ball, who did the last Maze Runner movies. So Fox owned the Planet of the Apes series, and then Disney bought Fox, and so a lot of these properties that Fox owned, like a Planet of the Apes, like a Predator, like an Alien, a lot of these properties have been sort of in limbo, as we didn't really know exactly what Disney was going to do with these films. We didn't really know exactly, were they going to make more of them? Were they going to reboot all of them? Were they going to take them in a different direction? Would they be under a Disney label? Would they be under a different label? We didn't know any of this. And the first win that we're hearing now is that they have brought on the Maze Runner director, Wes Ball, to do a new Planet of the Apes movie. Now, what we don't know at this point is whether or not this will be a continuation of Matt Reeves' films, or if it's going to be a full-on reboot, or something in between. We don't exactly know. My first thought about this, well, first of all, I've loved the Planet of the Apes. I saw all 5 of the original films, and there are some that are not the greatest, but there are some really strong ones in there, definitely. And with the 3 new ones, the first one being Rise from Rupert Wyatt, and the last 2 being Dawn and War from Matt Reeves, I've loved this past trilogy of movies. They have been phenomenal, and they have exceeded any sort of expectation that I've had for them. And really, when you look at those original 5 films, from the 60s through the 70s, those films really, when you look at what those movies are, they touch on certain ideas and concepts, but there are limitations within those movies in terms of they couldn't reach the levels that they were wanting to reach or trying to reach. And there's only so much you can do when you have people in monkey costumes, you know? It's hard to really go into deep dives in philosophy, into human nature, when you have people in ape costumes running around. But when it's CGI, like they've done with the last few ones, they've really been able to really show what Planet of the Apes can be. And that is something I've loved about these past few movies. So I will say, with this new movie coming, I'm very interested and very excited. I definitely want to see more of this. Where it's going to fall in terms of, is it a reboot, is it a continuation? I think what they're going to do is it's going to be somewhere in the middle. In that, where War for the Planet of the Apes leaves off, there is still a lot of story left to tell from the end of that movie, where that movie ends, to the very beginning of the story of the classic Planet of the Apes film. There's a whole bunch of story in between there that can be explored and should be explored. And I always said, even before we heard about this happening, right after War for the Planet of the Apes came out, I was saying, make a film that takes place 1,000 years from then. Make a film that takes place 1,000 years later, and we're further into the development of a concrete ape civilization. We're a little further in on the humans in a more of a subjugated role. We get further into the civilization, further into the society, not exactly where it is in the first film, but we're getting there. And we can see some key elements in terms of government forming and philosophies forming. And there's just so many more steps in between the end of War to the very beginning of the original Planet of the Apes films that they can fill in. And I had said from the beginning, when War came out, you can tell that story. Make it 1,000 years later. Doesn't have to have Caesar. Doesn't have to have any of them. You don't need Matt Reeves. You don't need any of the same actors. Tell a new story. And that's what I hope that they do. What I hope that they do, what I think they probably will do, is that Wes Ball is going to tell a new story with the same technology, the same feel, and the same style, set in the same universe as the past few Planet of the Apes films. But it's not going to have Andy Serkis. It's not going to have any of the other actors, Terry Notary, any of the other actors from the original, or rather the past trilogy. It won't have any of them. It'll just be a new story set in that same world, aesthetically the same technology, all that kind of stuff. Just a new story that takes place in between the end of War and the beginning of what we know the story to be for Planet of the Apes. As for Wes Ball directing, I never watched any of the Maze Runner movies. I know they didn't get the greatest critical reception, so that's not the most thrilling part. But if you had asked me before Dawn came out, hey, Nathaniel, they're going to get the guy who did Cloverfield to do the next Planet of the Apes movies, I would have been like, really? I mean, Cloverfield's fine, but there's not really much in there that would make me go, this guy is going to make a great Planet of the Apes movies. And look what he did with Dawn and War. They were phenomenal, and now he's off doing Batman. So just because he's had some films that haven't gotten the greatest critical reception, and just because I haven't seen them, does not mean that he can't make a great film. So the Wes Ball thing, I'm going to hold off and wait to actually see something from the movie before I give any more thoughts on his being brought on to direct the film. But I will say, I am very excited that Disney's going to keep going and try to do another Planet of the Apes films. And that's where I think it's going to fall timeline-wise. And I think that's ultimately where it makes the most sense. I don't think you need to reboot the last movies we saw, nor do I think you need to go straight into a remake of the original 1968 film. I think you can do another movie that's within that stretch of time. So anyways, what do you guys think? Are you excited by the prospect of a new Planet of the Apes movie coming? Where do you think it's going to fall time-wise? Do you agree with me that you think it'll be in between the two somewhere, give or take 1,000 years? Or do you think it's going to be something else entirely? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And now we move on to a segment here on the Movie Paradise Show that is called Trailer Talk. And how this works is that a bunch of different trailers drop every single week, and I try to pick one or two each week and talk about them here on the show. Last week we talked about a whole bunch. We had like one Did You Hear topic, and then we had like 3 or 4 different go or no goes. And the show is just all go or no go. This show is mostly trailer talk. There was a bunch of trailers that dropped this week that we have to talk about. And the first one we're going to start with is Black Widow. So this is the first MCU movie coming out after the whole Infinity Saga element ending with Spider-Man Far From Home. And the prospect of a Black Widow movie has always been interesting because out of all the characters, Hawkeye and Black Widow are just human characters, you know. They're humans who are very well trained, obviously, and have earned their place in alongside the other characters. But they themselves don't have any sort of superpower. And where do you go when you're this far into a cinematic universe? You know, this isn't phase 1. This isn't the preliminary setting the stage. We're deep into this now. We've had Thanos, we've had the Snap, we've had all these different galactic, supernatural, superhero elements. Where do you go in telling a story just about a human character doing a spy thriller, an espionage, James Bond globe-trotting film with a spy? Where do you go with that? And that's always been a very interesting question. I've always loved Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. I've loved her popping up in all the films that she does. And I've always been interested in a movie about her character, but I just didn't know how it would fit in at this point in the cinematic universe. But we got the trailer earlier this week, and I loved the trailer. I thought it was great. It really felt tighter. It felt more close-knit. It didn't have that sort of same scale and galactic feel that a lot of these other films have had, and that's such a great thing. You know, when Spider-Man Homecoming came out, granted Spider-Man's a superpowered being and all that, But that movie felt very close-knit. It was very much just about a character fighting another character in a neighborhood, keeping it smaller. It wasn't the world was going to end. It wasn't all these sort of galactic stakes. It was very much a more personal, tighter story. And that's what we seem to be getting from this trailer. I thought David Harbour was great in this. Florence Pugh looks great in this. Rachel Weisz looks great in this. I really liked all those dynamics. I think Scarlett Johansson, of course, looks great in this. She's always great as Black Widow. By the end of the trailer, when you have the whole sequence, which I'm assuming is from the third act, where they're diving down, and it looks like they're skydiving, there's like the destruction in the sky, and that got a little bit too much. I was like, okay, these kind of feel like too big of a stakes now. You know, the whole movie felt like it was very tight and personal and close, and then it got very big by the end. I mean, maybe it'll work in the context of the film. I'm not going to make any judgments about it this far out. But that was just one part where it felt like, oh, this is kind of gravitating away from what I would imagine this film is and kind of should be. But other than that, all the action looked phenomenal. The score of the trailer was really good. It was very well shot. It gave me a lot of reasons to be excited and interested in a Black Widow movie, which is exactly what you want. So I very much enjoyed this trailer, and it's one of these films of next year that I'm really looking forward to. Anyways, what did you guys think? Did you like the trailer for Black Widow? Is it a movie that you're really looking forward to? Is it one that you hasn't really interested you? Maybe the trailer's changed your mind from how you felt before it to now how you feel after it. Leave me your thoughts in the comments section below. And now we move on to the second trailer here on Trailer Talk, and that is for the new James Bond film, No Time to Die. I've been a fan of the Daniel Craig Bond films. I think he's done a fantastic job with the character. Not all the movies have been the greatest. I know people go nuts for Skyfall. It wasn't my favorite of the Bond movies, to be completely honest. But I love Casino Royale, and I just love Daniel Craig as the character. And he's coming back for one final film, directed by Cary Fukunaga, who is a fantastic director, by the way. And he is doing this final No Time to Die. This trailer was great. This was a strong week for trailers. This movie, like, it felt personal. It felt like there were personal stakes for James Bond. It had all the suaveness that you would expect from a James Bond movie. Like, he's, has the sunglasses, he's got the walk, he's got the Bond, James Bond, shaking that stir, all that kind of good stuff. It had that sleekness and style that a James Bond movie has, but it also had the grittiness of the action, going back to kind of what we saw with Casino Royale. Casino Royale really had the most gritty and brutal action violence of any of the James Bond movies, and from there it kind of went off more in a traditional Bond route. It looks like they're kind of going back to that. Rami Malek looks great in this. It was good to see Christoph Waltz pop back up. I love the shot when he's in the car and the car is getting like ridden with bullets, and then he flips the switch and the headlights turn into miniguns and he starts shooting everybody. It was just great. They did such a great job with it. This movie has been one that I've been looking forward to, but hasn't been like top of the list for 2020 or anything like that. When I'm sitting down to make my most anticipated of 2020 now, No Time to Die is probably going to slip in there. This was such a great, strong trailer. And after Spectre, which I liked more than other people, they had talked about, like, oh, are we going to reboot? Are we going to get a new James Bond? Which, is going to happen eventually, and I'm looking forward to seeing who plays Bond next. But then they said Daniel Craig's coming back for one final one. And I was like, okay. I mean, I love Daniel Craig as Bond, so I'm excited to see a new movie from him. But part of me was also just like, can we just also move on and just get someone else at this point? Because we've already we've had 4 films with Daniel Craig. We've exhausted all of that. Can't we just move on? This trailer made me go, nope, I want to see another Daniel Craig Bond film. Let's do a final one, send them off right, directed and written by Cary Fukunaga, and then we'll move on into the next Bond. And I can't wait. I think this trailer was great, and I'm very excited for this movie. So the question is, what do you guys think? Did you like the trailer for No Time to Die? Did it get you excited for this movie? Or do you just feel like, we've had 4, we're good, we don't need any more Daniel Craig James Bond? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And now we move on to the final trailer talk of today, and that is for the new Disney adaptation, Mulan. So Disney has been on a streak of these sort of live-action adaptations of their animated films. We've seen Cinderella, we've seen Jungle Book, we've seen Aladdin, we've seen Lion King, even though that's not live-action, that's CGI. We've seen a whole bunch of these. And some of the criticisms that these films have gotten, Dumbo, Beauty and the Beast, I forgot those. Some of the criticisms that these films have gotten is that some are saying they're too similar to the animated films. I know I personally loved Lion King, but I know a lot of people did not like Lion King because they said that it was just very much a shot-for-shot, beat-for-beat remake of the original movie. To which I kind of thought, well, what were you expecting? Like, there's, were you expecting them to just completely change the whole story and change everything about Lion King and do something completely different? Because then those same people would be outraged that Lion King was changed when the source material is so good. Why wouldn't you just do that? Why are you changing it? Double-sided coin, I guess. But that's been one of the prevailing criticisms of these adaptations, is that they are too similar to the original films. And now we get Mulan. We had an original trailer, now we have this full trailer. And what I love about these trailers, keeping in mind that criticism that I just said is not necessarily the same criticism that I have with a lot of these other films. I don't personally think they're too similar. I think they've done a fairly good job of adapting them. But one of the things that I am really liking about these trailers is that they feel completely different from the regular Mulan film. They feel completely different. It has a completely different tone, completely different style. You don't have Eddie Murphy as the dragon in there. You don't have a lot of these elements in it that made the original animated Mulan go a little bit more into the fantastical, a little bit more into, being an animated kids movie. It really feels like with this movie, with Mulan, they're going for just, yeah, it's Mulan, this is the basic story, but we're going for an epic. We're going for a war epic. And it has that cinematic quality to it. The cinematography is... Hold on one second. Sorry about that, folks. Where was I? The cinematic quality in these trailers is just phenomenal. The cinematography is beautiful. It's so well shot. The score was great. It had that epic feel to it. The performances all look great. The one part of it that kind of took me out was we see the characters turning into creatures and animals, and it had, I thought they were going for incredibly just real world, no magic, no real fantasy elements, and then it got to that point, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, I guess this is a world now where people can turn into birds and stuff. All right. So, I mean, I'm sure it's going to blend itself way better in the actual movie. That it will feel earned and it will feel right. It's just, for these trailers, they've only really shown it being sort of real world, all kind of within the same sense of reality. They didn't have these sort of fantastical elements until it got to that point in the trailer, and at that point it felt jarring. But I'm sure it'll blend itself a lot better in the actual movie. But I gotta say, incredibly impressed with this Mulan trailer. I thought it looked great. I thought it got me excited for a movie that I was like, yeah, Mulan, sure, I'm interested. That's kind of where I was at. Now I'm like, wow, damn, I'm actually really looking forward to this movie. So, anyways, what did you guys think? Were you blown away by the trailer for Mulan? Did it underwhelm you? Do you like that they're kind of going away from the animated film? Or do you think they probably should have stuck a little closer to it like they have done with some of the other live-action adaptations? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And now we move on here to a segment on the Movie Paradise Show called Go or No Go. And how Go or No Go works is that I take a film that I've seen that's a new release this week, And I simply tell you whether you should go see the movie, or no go as in you don't have to bother or waste your time to go see it. And the movie I'm going to talk about today is a new Netflix original film from Noah Baumbach, and that is Marriage Story, starring Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. This is a movie that I've been really looking forward to seeing all year. It's gotten all sorts of buzz, all sorts of praise, two fantastic actors in it, and I love Noah Baumbach. So I've been incredibly excited to see this movie, and Marriage Story is one of the best of the year. It's easily in my top 10, may even be in my top 5 right now. This movie is so good. The performances in this movie from Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver are just breathtakingly brilliant. They're just so good. There's so many different scenes where I was just watching and I was just in absolute awe of their performances. Scarlett Johansson, when she meets Laura Dern's character for the first time, has a monologue, a very long monologue, and just the pacing of it, how the emotional beats of it, the highs and the lows, and how dynamic it all was, just the levels of it. Like, her performance was so good. Adam Driver has so many great scenes. The final scene of this movie involves a letter, and that's all I'll say. And Adam Driver, oh my god, he breaks up, and it's just, oh my god, it's so good. The performances are just so incredible. But it's not done in a way where, like, the movie's like, look everybody, check out these fantastic performances, throwing it in your face. It's so subtle, and it's nuanced, and it's deep, and it just feels very real world. It feels very real and organic. The characters felt real. They felt like real people. They had the layers and the complexities and the depths of real people. These weren't one-note characters. These weren't characters who were just right or wrong, good or evil, or anything like that. They had different flaws. They had flaws. They had great strengths. They had, both of the characters were right in circumstances and wrong in other circumstances and had flaws, and it was just so beautifully done. Performances were fantastic. The writing was excellent. The dialogue was just great all the way through. You know, it wasn't stylized dialogue. It felt like this is what people would say. It felt like what these characters would say. And, you know, I was reading up about the movie, and apparently Noah Baumbach brought in Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson, Laura Dern before he wrote the script to really get them to help infuse things into the characters, into the story. And you can tell, it makes sense having seen the film because it feels so personal. It feels so natural and organic. And it makes sense that the movie is shaped to their strengths because they are so strong in it. I adored this movie. It's sad, it's heart-wrenching, but it's beautiful. It covers life, it covers relationships, it covers love, it covers all these different things. I just thought Marriage Story was just brilliant, and I loved it, and it's one of my favorite movies of the year. So I'm absolutely going to give it a go. You should definitely go check that out on Netflix. Question is, what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to see Marriage Story yet? If not, are you planning on watching it? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Alright. Oh, sorry there. And we're going to move on to our main topic here on the Movie Paradise Show. And our main topic of this week. Last week we covered what was our top 10 favorite movies of this past decade, the 2010s. And it was a good video. You can go find that online of Rob and I talking about our top 10 favorite movies of the past decade. But it had me thinking, you know, with this decade, we've had a lot of different franchises put out different movies. You know, we've had franchises created and defeated and destroyed throughout this decade. We've had franchises that have put out like 10 films we've had a lot of different franchises throughout this past decade, highs and lows. And I thought it would be interesting to put together a list of what I thought the 5 strongest movie franchises were this decade. You know, what franchises had the best collections of films this decade. So let's get into it a little bit and let's talk about my personal picks for the top 5 strongest movie franchises of this past decade. And the first one, number 5, which is the first one I'm going to talk about, is in fact Toy Story. So I think it's a testament to how good Toy Story is that it had 2 installments when a lot of the other films I'm going to talk about had 3 or 4. Toy Story had 2 installments this decade. Toy Story 3 in 2010, and then Toy Story 4 this past year. They really bookended the decade, both starting and ending it with a Toy Story movie. But these movies are so good. Toy Story 3 is just phenomenal. It was nominated for Best Picture. It's just, Toy Story 3 is absolutely incredible. And Toy Story 4, I really enjoyed it a lot. I don't think, it wasn't quite on the same level as maybe Toy Story 2 or 3. It's probably more on the same level as Toy Story 1 for me, but these past 2 Toy Story movies have been phenomenal. They really have just done such a great job with Toy Story. And Toy Story is one of the all-time best animated movie franchises of all time. So my number 5 pick of the decade for strongest franchises, number 5 has got to be Toy Story. My number 4 is going to be Avengers. Now, originally Avengers was going to be a little bit higher on the list, but I decided to put it here. I love Infinity War and Endgame are the 2 best Avengers movies in my opinion. They're fantastic. They're some of the best MCU movies. The first Avengers movie, I really enjoy. It doesn't hold up as much now since we've had so many different team-up movies. Because, you know, when the first Avengers came out, this was the first time we were seeing Captain America and Iron Man and Hulk and Black Widow and all these characters on the screen together. This is incredible. We've had that so much now that it loses its effect a little bit, but Avengers 1 is still incredibly strong. And Age of Ultron is one that I was initially really disappointed with the first time I saw it, but the more times I've seen it, the more I've come to enjoy it. I still don't think I think it's the weakest of the 4, but it's still a very good one. And then Infinity War and Endgame are great. I love those movies. So Avengers is going to be my number 4 favorite franchise of this decade. They've had some very, very, very strong movies. And my number 3 of the decade is going to be the John Wick films. John Wick is probably, if I had to pick the most pleasant surprise franchise of the decade, it would be John Wick. Because nobody was expecting anything of that first John Wick movie. Oh, just what is this terrible looking Keanu Reeves action movie? It's going to come and go. And then we're all blown away by how fantastic John Wick is. And the greatest thing about this franchise is how it's evolved since the first movie. You had the first film, and then you had John Wick Chapter 3 this year. And the action choreography, the stunts, the long takes, and everything that they put into making these movies and how it's grown and developed over this past decade. This is just one of the finest franchises of the decade. I love the John Wick movies, and they're doing more, and I can't wait to see what they do with it. So I've just loved what they've done with the John Wick franchise. My number 2 favorite franchise of the past decade has been what they've done with Mission Impossible. I've loved what they've done with this series. Ghost Protocol in 2011 I thought was fantastic. It was my first real introduction to the Mission Impossible series. That's where I jumped on. And Brad Bird did such a great job with it. It had stakes. It had thrills. I loved how it leaned into the different gadgets and tools that they use. It really had that feel to it. It was just incredible. And then Christopher McQuarrie came in and redefined the entire series with Rogue Nation and the best of them all, Fallout. Last year's Fallout. My God, Fallout is such a good movie. And they also evolved the series in the same way that John Wick evolved from from what the first John Wick movie is to these really long take, heavily choreographed action sequences. Mission Impossible has really evolved and changed to be, let's just go for the craziest stunts you can possibly imagine and have Tom Cruise jump out of planes and go underwater for 7 minutes and do all this crazy stuff. You know, it's really, really evolved and changed over the years. And each movie just gets better and better. Mission Impossible is one of the strongest franchises of this past decade, and they're filming 2 more back-to-back right now. I I think the first one's either 2021 or 2020. I have a feeling it's 2021, though we're a little further away from it. But I can't wait. I love this series. They've really changed it. They've really redefined it. Mission Impossible is my number 2 pick for strongest franchise of the past decade. My number 1, I was just talking about it. It's Planet of the Apes. Rise, Dawn, War. This is the finest franchise of the 2010s. What they were able to do with this whole series is just absolutely incredible. From first let's just say, the technology that they've had and how it's increased. The CGI, I mean, the level of detail and realism in Dawn and War. Rise, not as much, but Dawn and War is just stunning. And maybe we're a little bit desensitized to it because now we've had Jungle Book, now we've had Lion King, we've had some of these movies where, photorealistic CGI animals looks fine. The effects that they had in these movies were just changed the game. And Andy Serkis's performance in all 3 of these movies. Rise he gave my favorite performance in Rise. The humanity in him, which is ironic since we're talking about an ape, but the humanity, the confliction, the depth, how he struggles with what is right, what is moral, and these instincts that he has, and him coming into his own as a leader. The fact that we can get as deep character work in a CGI ape as we do in these movies is just a testament to how strong the writing is, how strong the direction is, how strong the people who do all the animation, the effects, how strong Andy Serkis's performances and all the other people who act in these movies. They just took a series that could have been utterly laughable, that some might make the case was utterly laughable in other films, and they made something that had strength and power and emotional depth and dynamicism and just was such a strong series. I just am in absolute awe of these movies. I love them. I think these are the 3 strongest films within a franchise of this past decade. I think they've just blown it out of the park. So, to recap real quick, my number 5 strongest franchise of the 2010s, it was Toy Story, which has Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4. My number 4 was Avengers, with the Avengers Age of Ultron, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. My number 3 was John Wick, with John Wick Chapter 2, and John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. My number 2 was Mission Impossible, with Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and Mission Impossible Fallout. And my number 1 pick for the strongest franchise of this past decade was Planet of the Apes, with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and War for the Planet of the Apes. And so those are my picks. Question is, what do you guys think? What are some of the strongest movie franchises of this past decade for you? Do you agree with my picks? Do you have other picks that you would have put in there over mine? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And now we're going to look over to the live chat real quick to see if we have any questions here. And we have some questions here. Rob Jaginta, our regular co-host on the show, is joining us in the chat. Rob is chiming in. What do we have? Rob says, when you've seen Queen and Slim, don't miss it. Trust me, I do not want to miss Queen and Slim. I've heard nothing but excellent things about this movie, both from you and from other people. I definitely am going to try to watch it as soon as I get a chance to. I have a list running on my phone of all the 2019 movies I need to see before I put together any official top 10 lists or anything like that. Queen and Slim is on there. I will definitely be checking it out before the end of the year. Rob writes, eating Chinese food while I watch you, #blessed. Well, yes, I am definitely best accompanied by Chinese food. Good on ya. Rob writes in, would you see 1917 at the Jordan's IMAX? Excuse me. Jordan's IMAX is a theater that I've gone to and seen. What did I see there? I saw Avengers Infinity War. I saw Blade Runner 2049. I saw Solo there. I've seen a few different movies at the Jordan's IMAX. Jordan's IMAX is great for specifically Roger Deakins cinematography. Seeing Blade Runner 2049 there on the giant screen of the Jordan's IMAX was just phenomenal. And I would love to see 1917 there because I cannot wait for that movie. I think that's a movie. I think 1917 is a movie that's going to creep up pretty high on my list when things are all said and done. That movie's shaping up to be something phenomenal. I can't wait to see it. Rob writes in, the acting in Marriage Story was so outstanding. The real star of the movie was the writing. Holy crap, that guy can write. Noah Baumbach does such a great job with writing human characters. And, you know, there are other writers who write people who are supposed to be like real characters, and, you know, they feel like characters. They don't necessarily feel like human beings. Noah Baumbach has such a great style and way of writing that he writes characters who just feel like real people. There are definitely other writers who have that too, but they just felt like those could be your neighbors. Those could be your friends. Those could be the couple that you see who have a kid to go to your school. You know, they felt just like such real organic people. And when you look into I don't want to give any context, but there is an argument between Scarlett Johansson's character and Adam Driver's character at some point in the movie. And it's filled with a lot of pauses and beats and moments that feel like that these would be things that the actors are kind of just improvising in the moment. But no, Noah Baumbach wrote in every single beat, every single line, every single everything into all the things to really structure it. The fact that the script can be as structured as it is, but feel as organic as it does, is just incredible. He is a fantastic writer, and the performances are so good in that. So I believe that's all we've got here for comments at the moment. So that's going to do it for this installment of the Movie Paradise Show. Thank you guys for tuning in. So next week, I unfortunately cannot do the show at 1 p.m. Next Saturday. However, I am debating maybe doing it on Friday instead. Friday at 1 p.m. So if I do change it to Friday, I'll let you guys know in advance to make sure you guys can tune in. So there won't be a show on Saturday at 1 p.m. There may be one on Friday, or there may not be one at all that week. If I get into the weekend, it's like Wednesday, and I'm realizing there really isn't that much to talk about, then I probably won't do a show. But I'll keep you guys up to date on that so that you know when to tune in. So that's going to do it for this week. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content. Be sure to follow us on all of our various social medias at Movie Paradise 99. And tune in, not next Saturday, but every other Saturday after that at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube for the Movie Paradise Show. And until the next live stream that we do.